Meredith, can you tell if we have a quorum of the members?
Yeah, I was just counting. So I believe we have, I'm counting 7 advisory committee members out of, we have 12 in total, so we are over 50%. But yeah, I'm seeing 7 advisory members.
All right, then maybe one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds good. Okay. All right, not seeing anybody else joining the waiting room at the moment, but I will keep my eye out. Anybody else that joins can hop in and we could get things started. So I can kick us off. My name is Meredith Perks. Good to see everyone again, and thank you for being here tonight. I'm with Vanderwall and Associates and have been working with the city and with my colleague Scott Harrington and some of our other team members who are able to join tonight on the strategic plan. Are just glad to bring the advisory committee together again to talk about the draft vision and framework and some of the progress that's been made on the strategic plan so far. Just as a reminder, if you didn't hear me at the beginning here, we are recording tonight's meeting for posting online after tonight. So if there's any friends or neighbors that weren't able to join that want to hear what we had, about our conversation or see this presentation, it is being recorded. And tonight is really a meeting of the Strategic Plans Advisory Committee. So it is publicly noticed and open to the public, but not taking public comment tonight. We do have a public meeting scheduled that's been noticed, and there's a flyer out there for March 16th at 6:30. There's a Zoom link for that, and we'll have more details at the end of the meeting to discuss that. But just wanted to make that clear kind of upfront, but expect kind of get through a lot of content tonight and have some hopefully some good discussion with the advisory committee for as we move forward. I know for many on the advisory committee, this will be a bit of a sort of repeat or another discussion of these vision and framework components, as you're also members of the vision panels that we've been discussing the framework with over the last couple of weeks. So we're kind of glad to bring this group together and have hopefully a slightly different or kind of extended conversation from what we've been hearing in the vision panels. So for tonight's agenda, it's going to look a little similar, but hopefully what we've tried to do is incorporate some of that feedback so you have new things to react to and can help provide some confirmation of these final sort of vision and framework components and help us move forward into the next draft of the vision and framework and ultimately creation and kind of drafting of the strategic plan. So just as a reminder of where we are in the strategic plan process, really spent much of up until the end of the year in step 2, working to gather a variety of inputs from the public, our vision panels, the first advisory committee meeting, talking with staff, department heads, elected officials, and just gathering input on what is important for the strategic plan and for the city of Middleton moving forward. Since the new year, we've really been here in step 3 with the drafting of the draft the preliminary draft of the vision and framework, taking that to discuss with council and staff, as well as the vision panel and now advisory committee, to just gather input, make sure we're headed in the right direction, and that what we've put together reflects your previous comments and input, ultimately taking that to a public event and meeting, and then moving forward into the development of an implementation plan. So just kind of reminding where we are in the process and some of the next steps from where we go from here. Got a couple people still joining here, so that's great. So sorry if I keep looking off to the waiting room while talking. So as a reminder, this is familiar to some, but just want to make sure we understand sort of how the strategic plan is being developed and how it'll be structured moving forward. We understand and we know, and we're very familiar with the 2021 comprehensive plan that was completed by the city and its staff over the last year or so, and that involved a very robust public input process. And so know that it was a really well put together plan that still reflects the values and goals for the city. So the comprehensive plan is sort of a starting place, and we for this strategic plan. But what we look for now in the vision, mission, and strategic framework are to drill down into some of those concepts and kind of gear things towards a more strategic or operational direction. So we have the vision. What we'll be reviewing tonight is a vision statement, which is a broad aspirational statement for the future of the city, a mission statement that kind of highlights the values and purpose for the Middleton government and organization, and kind of the operational focus of the city, and then the strategic framework that outlines the key goals that need to be addressed to achieve the vision. And so these are really primary themes and goals that then drive the creation of the implementation action plan. What you've been seeing so far in the materials that we shared ahead of the meeting, or what we reviewed tonight and in the vision panels, right now it's very kind of text, and that's what will be kind of incorporated into the document. But what will ultimately be created is something similar to this example from Glendale, which is a vision graphic, where we take these themes, these initiatives, and put them into a more kind of one-page graphic format that can be used as a quick reference tool for city staff, officials, and the public, to kind of keep grounding us in what these goals are for the strategic plan. So I just want to kind of remind us that ultimately what we're crafting tonight, and with all of this feedback, will lead to a product similar to this, something graphic and usable. So again, wanted to remind us too of this is the vision statement and values that were identified as part of the comprehensive plan, and really a starting point for us. So when we review the vision statement, you'll see that it really starts with the vision statement from the comprehensive plan. We worked to incorporate some language that made it a bit more strategic and place-based, and we've received feedback already on how we can kind of better tailor that place-based aspect of what our initial draft is. So that's really great direction, and we can talk a bit more about that tonight. But just a reminder that we're aware and using these values and vision statement from the comprehensive plan as a starting place. So as we saw in the planning process up till this point, in that step 2 and the work of the end of last year and gathering all of this input, I just kind of wanted to kind of bullet those out a little bit and show you everything that was really kind of feeding into this development of the vision and framework. From the initial vision panel, we have 6 vision panels that are focused on a variety of sort of groups and perspectives from the community that have been providing really useful input. So we had vision panel conversations, this advisory committee, of course, public workshop and survey, so gathered just general public input, department head interviews, as well as city council and elected official interviews, and then operational analysis and asset and opportunity analysis by our team. So all of this information has been kind of in our minds as we drafted this vision and framework, and hopefully that, if you contributed to some of this input, you'll see it reflected back, and that's what we want to confirm tonight. So from here, I'll turn it over to Scott Harrington to start walking us through. We want to kind of use the bulk of the evening tonight to have conversation and dig into the content. So from here, turn it over to Scott to talk through the vision and mission statements.
Sure, thank you, Meredith. Lisa, did you have a question?
I did, thanks, Scott. Regarding the Glendale graphic that you showed us, I was just wondering, is that what you envision as the final product of this activity, or is that sort of the executive summary in a graphic form, and the actual strategic plan is going to be much more detailed in terms of timing, timelines, sequencing, and actual concrete actions?
Yeah, definitely the latter. So that's sort of the executive summary. But yes, the plan itself will be far more detailed and go way beyond that.
Thank you.
I guess maybe just for the record, we could kind of call roll here on who's all here. So, I mean, I can kind of see names, but maybe I'm assuming that most of you know each other, but just real quick to remind ourselves who's on the committee, and maybe a little bit about your background, like, hey, I'm on the council, or I'm on the whatever vision panel. So I'll just call off names, and if you want to just acknowledge your presence and again, kind of why you're on the committee or what group you're part of. So I'm just going to go through this list. So Luke Frizard.
Hello, everyone. Luke Frizard. I am the council representative for District 5, which I like to say is the soul of Middleton. I'm just joking. It's a pleasure to be part of this. I've lived in Middleton since 2012.
Thanks, Luke. Glad to have you here. John Dennison. I don't see him showing up in our list here. So he is the business community representative. Erin Sumners. Okay, she's on the arts committee and was the youth representative. Jill Krantz.
Hi, I'm Jill Krantz. I'm the retired senior center director for the city of Middleton. So I'm here representing older adult interests in the strategic plan.
Great, thank you. Dana Montague.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Dana Minogue. I'm the superintendent in the school system here. I'm also on the education vision panel.
Right. I guess I get a C- for pronunciation today, so sorry about that. Ellen Carlson.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ellen Carlson, the Executive Director of Middleton Outreach Ministry. We're an organization that's creating food and housing stability in our community, and I'm on the underrepresented vision panel.
Great, thank you. Lisa Gennaro, if you want to introduce yourself again.
Okay, you still get a C, Scott. It's actually Lisa Hanairo. Common mistake. Anyway, I chair the Sustainability Committee. I've lived in Middleton since 2017, and I'm also on the Community Influencers Vision Panel.
Sorry again. Doug Zwank. Not seeing him here on our list of folks here, so okay.
Was able to join. He just joined. I'm not sure. I don't see his audio fully connected yet, but Doug is. Okay, good. So he's a former mayor and is part of the community influencer vision panel. Don Rick. Don, all right, don't see him. Principal at Cromroy and on the
Education Underrepresented panel. Kurt Paulson.
Good evening. I'm Kurt Paulson. I'm on the Plan Commission. And for my day job, I teach planning at UW-Madison.
Great. And then John Schaefer.
Yeah, John Schaefer, 33-year resident of Middleton and live in a landmark house near downtown. I chair Parks, Recreation, Forestry Committee. I'm also on the Plan Commission and I'm on the advisory panel here. So welcome all.
Excellent. Thank you. And then Joycelyn Sansing.
Hello, Jocelyn Sansing, Middleton Public Library Director. Lived in Middleton since 2016. Good to be here this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, I totally failed pronunciation. I'll put on my dunce hat and we'll move on. But I apologize for that. Really glad to have all the committee members here. Again, certainly wonderful to have all the public with us tonight. As Meredith mentioned at the outset of the meeting, we are going to have a public meeting where everybody in attendance will have plenty of opportunity to provide input. So we're really kind of holding the conversation tonight to just the panel. I also want to note that one of our co-consultants is on the line with us tonight. Although, did she just drop off? I just saw her picture. So, oh, there she is over there. Annette Miller with the EQT by Design. Welcome, Annette. Glad to have you with us tonight. Okay, so mission and vision statement. I think all but like maybe 3 of you are on a vision panel and participated over the last couple of weeks as we walk through the vision and the mission statement and the objectives kind of in detail. And so rather than repeat that process, what we want to do is sort of share with you what some of the input from the vision panels were, and kind of get your thoughts on then how we might alter some of these based on that input. And then obviously, if you have additional thoughts of your own, we would love to hear that as well. But we're going to take a different approach than we did with the vision panels. As you know, we've got a lot of material to go through. And so want to be respectful of everybody's time and still get through the material. So we'll be moving at a little bit of a clip. If for some reason you don't get a chance to provide the thoughts that you had, you can absolutely email Meredith after this and provide the input that way, because we definitely wanted to hear from all of you. So with the vision statement, we want to go to the next slide. So the vision statement is an outward kind of look. We're doing a strategic plan, which is really, at the end of the day, going to have a lot of very specific recommendations on how the organization should operate and specific things that they should do. And the vision statement is the way to make sure that we're doing the right thing, not just doing things right. And so we've gone through this entire process with these vision panels, with the public meeting we already had, the one we're going to have again with this panel, to really make sure that we're truly reflecting how the community sees itself, where the community wants to go, so that when we come up with those specific things that are going to, have an impact on how resources are spent, both cash and time by city staff, and where the attention is, that it's in line with what the community wants to do. The mission statement then is more that inward focus in terms of how does the organization itself operate, what are its values. So probably spend a little more time on the vision statement than the mission, but want to hear from both. You have the statement here in front of you. It does build from the vision statement that was included in the comprehensive plan, and then we've kind of added some things to it. One of the things that we've added to it that maybe needs some more work is we want people to read this and kind of instantly know that we're talking about Middleton and it's reflective of Middleton, and not something that is, kind of overly generic, a great place to live, work, and play. We want something that really is reflective of Middleton, both in terms of what are the issues that are important to it, as well as kind of geographically sort of tied down. So located in the heart of Dane County, that's certainly true. And that's certainly, I think, part of Middleton's appeal, and as a community that you really are right in the middle of it all. But there may be other descriptors too, and we'll see from the input that we got from folks of what some of that maybe could expand to or be used in lieu of simply the heart of Dane County. Things that we highlighted were things that we heard a lot from the vision panels, that these particular things were really important: the environmental stewardship, good neighbor spirit, diversity, and equity were things that common themes that came up as we asked people to respond to this statement of those things particular reflecting Middleton, and understanding that this is a vision statement. This is what we want to be in 20 years. We may not be here right now, and that's okay. This is an aspirational, inspirational kind of statement of where we're trying to be. So if it doesn't exactly line, if we're falling short of some of these things now, that's okay. That means that we got some work to do to kind of get ourselves there. So go to the next slide. So we asked the council, the department heads, the vision panels about their level of agreement with this statement. You can see that the vast majority were in agreement with it, a small number of disagreement. And then in terms of some of the things that maybe could be modified with it, on the next slide, we show some of that. So a couple of thoughts then that we took from the panels. One was maybe moving the good neighbor city further up into this, kind of starting off with that, or being right off the bat that that's really a truly defining aspect of Middleton, and we should kind of keep that front and center. That is our motto. We really do try to live by that motto, and just sort of move it up to give it a little more importance. Talked about the location, in addition to or in lieu of heart of Dane County, maybe our location on the lake, maybe that we're home to the Pheasant Branch Conservancy, some other kind of way to sort of tie us down geographically. There were some questions about urban. Are we urban? Are we suburban? What does that mean? Is it important? Urban is in the vision statement that's in the comprehensive plan. And so, and is sort of the direction that the city is headed in. So understanding this is 20 years out, I think the city will clearly be more urban. Whether that is an appropriate term to use here, we'll look for your feedback from that. And then also just a few questions on what did full service mean? And what that means is that Middleton as a city organization provides almost all the services that cities do. We've got a library, we've got a senior center, we got a youth center, we have police, we have EMS, we have public works. So as I'm sure many of you know, not all communities provide all of that. They're kind of more limited services, but one of Middleton's defining features to us anyhow, and as what we've heard from the input, is that you really do provide not only a full range of service, but you do an excellent job at that. So we could maybe expand a little bit more about what that means, but that's what that means. And then kind of likewise, sort of facilities and resources. We were trying to keep this short, but facilities are that, we have a city hall, we have a senior center, we have an EMS building, we have parks, and then resources are like programs for like recreation, or programming that's done at the library or at the senior center. So trying to kind of differentiate between just physical facilities as well as the programming. Again, there may be a better way to say that. And then one other comment that we had was that in our statement right now, we talk about Middleton being a leader in stewardship, and the question is, as a leader in quality of life, do we want to be, is that the goal? Is the goal to be a leader, or is the goal just to do a good job at it? Do we care whether we're the leader if we're, really focused, on that. So that was a comment there. So John, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to comment because I had trouble with that paragraph for the same reason, the middle one about facilities versus resources. You even clouded it up yourself when you said we have facilities such as parks. And so listing them that way, I had a hard time understanding what is facilities separate from parks, separate from community resources. I think that I understand what you're trying to say, but I think it's a messy sentence. That because all three of those overlap and link with one another, and high quality facilities separate from parks and community resources made no sense to me. So just to add a comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. Other thoughts that folks want to share, either based on these input that we got or any other thoughts that you have? Kurt, see your hand.
Yeah, I'm not to steal Superintendent Minogue's fire, but we should put schools on this, because when people say Middleton, they think of the good schools. That's just, you talk to businesses, you talk to people in housing. That's one of the reasons people want to be here. So maybe make it parks, and instead of high quality facilities, which John pointed out is a little ambiguous, parks, schools, and maybe one or two other things, and community resources. So that'd be a good place to put it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I concur with Kurt on that.
All right, Lisa.
Thanks. I think Kurt has a great suggestion there, and I'm going to make a pitch again to just use the vision statement that's in the comprehensive plan, which is shorter than this one and avoids the whole parks, high quality facilities and community resources confusion. I think it's possible to work in the Lakeside City of Middleton, which is something that came up on the Community Influencers Vision Panel. Although personally, I think the tie to the Conservancy, if we were to identify Middleton by one natural resource feature, when I think of the lake, I think of Madison, but if I think of Middleton, I think of the Conservancy. But we certainly could add schools, like the Lakeside City of Middleton is a sustainable urban community with exceptional schools and a high quality of life that is rooted in environmental stewardship. If you could show the previous or the comp plan's vision statement, I don't see what's wrong with that one. I think it was a great start. It's been publicly vetted and approved by council just over a year ago. And I, again, make a pitch to go with what was working. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on the vision statement before we move on to mission? Okay, let's go to the mission statement. So again, the mission statement's more that inward philosophy. How do we operate as an organization? What's important to us? How do we sort of operate to work towards that vision? So you see the statement there. The two things that are highlighted were things that we heard feedback consistently across kind of the vision panels, that transparent and professional were two things that people thought were important. Being more operationally oriented, didn't spend necessarily a lot of time on this with each vision panel or get a lot of input, but we did from the staff and from the council. But Kurt, looks like you got your hand up.
Yeah, I guess with that, maybe I'm the only one having some confusion, but I suspect others are as well. The client for the strategic plan, or the focus, is the City of Middleton government, not the city as a whole, right? And so the vision, normally when you think of an organization that does a strategic plan, they have internal and external constituencies and resources and personnel to allocate. But the vision statement is really the city as a whole, as part of a region, right? But we're just really focused on the city government for this strategic plan. Is that right?
Yes, the plan itself and the recommendations in it are really going to be driving city decision making and organizational, issues. So the vision statement is just again, I kind of describe it as the guts of the strategic plan. The bulk of it is going to be talking about how to do things right. The vision statement is what helps us remember that we're doing the right thing, that, we're not just providing good services because we want to, it's because our community is trying to achieve this vision and these objectives.
Well, then I guess to Lisa's point is either we use the vision statement that comes from the comprehensive plan, which is for the city as a whole, not just the government, or we would have to write a new vision statement, which is the vision statement of the city government, both elected officials and the various departments and agencies that constitute it. Right? You see, I think that is a little bit of why people are confused.
Yeah.
Why reinvent the wheel on the vision statement if it's for the city, not for city government? But you could write a version of the vision statement which is about what city government does, the idea of carrying into being those values of place, of sustainability, of equity, and being a leader in quality of life and services. Okay, that's my 2 cents, sir.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And again, what we did have for the vision statement built, most of that is in the current vision statement. We just sort of added to it some of the aspects that the comprehensive plan didn't touch on, like, broader perspective on all the things that this city does, rather than sort of just more physical growth and development. Not that the current vision statement is limited only to that, but we just, because what we need to be able to do is kind of draw some, kind of straight lines from the vision statement to the objectives to the recommendations in the plan. So the vision statement, kind of sets out that broader framework, and then we start to sort of operationalize that. Luke.
My immediate reaction both to the previous slide and then this slide is, in particular, the first sentence is, it seems a little run on, and it seems a little like we're trying to cram a bunch of words in a manner to try and make it sense rather than reflective. So to me, I think to myself, the city of Middleton provides high value, high quality service to the city residents, period. Middleton is a transparent leader in supporting, retaining, and developing professional staff, reflects the diversity and values of the Middleton community, period. Like, to me, that seems much more straightforward. I think of the most compelling mission statements in particular are those that can be recited, from memory, because they really do embody the ethos. And I just worry that the longer that these run on, the less memorable they are, and thus the less impactful they become.
Excellent point. And I absolutely agree. Other thoughts on this? So we will definitely take all that to heart and try to tighten these up. We'll look again at how the vision statement varies or doesn't vary from what's in the comp plan, because as Meredith started with, our whole idea here was to build up from the comp plan, not to go backwards. So, and we don't want to, create any confusion. So I really appreciate the insight and thoughts on that. And we will take another look. These are the kind of results. So after each vision panel, we sent out a survey. So that's where we got this information. And again, you can see pretty strong level of agreement. The comments on the mission statement that we did here about implementing diversity and equity, not just sort of saying it, but that we're committed to implementing that. Maybe something about staff recruitment. And trying to continue to hire top quality employees. And then one of the things we heard from the business panel was that a lot of what we're going to cover tonight, they felt was really seemed to be almost specifically aimed at residents versus residents and businesses, and that we should reflect that all of this doesn't just apply to how the city provides services or what its aspirations are for just its residents, but its business community as well. before we go to that, Meredith, I just want to see now that people have seen these 3 comments, whether anybody has anything else they want to add. Okay. Now we can go ahead. So the strategic objectives, we ended up with 9 of them. And as was kind of said, I think by Luke a minute ago, like the more we kind of put in there, the more we write, then sort of the less importance or impact these things have. And so 9, in our opinion, was kind of too many. The idea of the strategic objective is to really elevate a handful of issues that are really key. Okay, if that's our vision, that's where we're trying to go. And here's where we are today. What are those things that we really need to keep an eye on, that we really need to be focused on? Not in any way at the exclusion of everything else, but just what are really our priorities right now, that given where the world is, given where we want to go, where we really need to be putting in some additional effort, maybe allocating additional resources, whatever it might be. And so, you know, the 9 that sort of emerged from discussions initially with the staff and the council, I mean, those are all good things and hard to argue with, but we really felt like we could break those 9 maybe into 2 sets, kind of 2 tiers, where there's, you know, kind of really top priorities, and then there's priorities to just really help elevate those issues that are of really the utmost importance to remain focused on and to really be paying attention to. So to help us do that, we also ask the vision panels to kind of rank these 9. And so what you see here then are sort of the scores, if you will, because everybody who responded ranked each of these 1 to 9. Obviously, they all did it differently, but in our scoring system here, the higher score, the higher level of priority. And so equity-centered environment for all residents was first, and then you can see long-term financial operational stability, sustainability, and resiliency. So these are in a different order. What we sent to you prior to the meeting was just the order, the order kind of in which we came up with them. We weren't suggesting any ranking with them, but at this point now, what we're suggesting is that we break these into 2 tiers. And so based on that, we're suggesting that we kind of have this top tier or tier 1 of these top 4, which would be the equity-centered environment, long-term financial operational stability, sustainability, and affordable housing. And then tier 2 would be the other items of public safety and transportation. Within each tier, my own thought is that the prioritization within each tier maybe doesn't really matter. So all the tier 1s are kind of equally important. All the tier 2s are equally important. If you feel like each of these should continue to be ranked, then we can certainly discuss that. But in our feeling of breaking them into 2 tiers was that we kind of have this group and we have this group, and that the order within them is then less important. So again, with most of you being in the vision panels, we kind of took each of these apart, and we'll kind of do that. So maybe what we could do is kind of go through them as a reminder of what they are, and as you know, for those who weren't in a vision panel and didn't quite go through that level of detail, and then we can kind of come out the back end and see whether this is, you know, the grouping that you all agree with. But I guess I would just start with this idea of kind of breaking them into 2 tiers, and any reactions that any of you have to that. You know, regardless of what's in what tier, just the idea of trying to have some differentiation.
Yeah, I think number 5 should be in tier 1.
Yeah, so let's kind of hold off on that till we get through them and come back. But the idea, but Doug, are you in favor of having 2 tiers? So for a moment, putting aside what's in what, but that we would kind of break them into 2 groups?
Sure. I think
Okay.
that's a good idea.
So before we kind of jump into these, anybody else have any thoughts on that? So let's kind of walk through them then, and then we can come back to this once we're kind of refreshed with what all they involved, and then see whether that tiering system works out. So these are now in the order that we just saw. So that's how we're going to walk through them. The equity-centered environment. We had quite a bit here and worked with Annette and her team on these. And there is a fair amount of overlap, but we talk about affordable housing, we talk about, I think, transit in here. And so I think one of the things we'll do as we get into the finalizing these is to sort of minimize, the overlap. But having said that, equity is one of those things that by its very nature and its very meaning needs to permeate everything that we do. So equity is really a part of all those other 8. It's a part of all the other things. But at the same time, there's still some work that the city needs to do on understanding equity, how we execute that, what does that mean? And so while we broke equity out as its own issue and something to be addressed, just want to make it clear that it doesn't mean that like equity is over here and safety is over there. That equity is a part of everything, but we needed to call it out as a way to recognize it as an issue that needs some additional work. You want to bring up the comments then? So these were some of the comments that we got back. I want to make it clear too, by the way, that we've had a challenge of kind of reassembling the underrepresented communities group. So the input that vision panel has not yet kind of weighed in on all of this. And so Annette and her folks are working on that. We hope to get that input here over the next couple of weeks. And certainly as we sort of finalize this stuff, we will take that into account. But I just wanted you all to know that we have not yet received that input. John, I see you've got your hand up. You're on mute. John, you're on mute.
Sorry, forgive me for being stupid. I appreciate here the DEI is given together with diversity, equity, inclusion. When you put it in the document sent to us, you never put any of that except DEI. And I just think it's helpful always to spell out an acronym before you start using it, which you didn't in the document we got.
No, okay, thank you. So the comments here, that critical initiative, we talked about how it's kind of really interconnected with some other things, in particular like affordable housing and affordable living in general, transportation, opportunity for more integration again with kind of businesses in our DEI initiatives, partnering with the schools, and reminding ourselves too that DEI it means inclusion of everything. So while we tend to, I think, initially think of race and ethnicity, it's age, it's physical ability, mental ability. There's a lot of different things that where we really want to be all inclusive, that we're spanning the all of those. So there wasn't really necessarily a lot of comments to make changes because this one was pretty comprehensive to begin with. But any thoughts that anybody else has in terms of this? Maybe Meredith, we can go back to the initiative itself. Ellen.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I guess I was going to go back to that other page that you just switched it off of, but no, that's okay. So I'm just thinking about E and wondering, there's value in listing more or not listing at all? Because I can think of a whole ton of things that aren't mentioned there that are well beyond that. So, and I don't know if that's something for, I don't know if it's better to take it out and just be really clear that that's what we need to do, or if it's worth taking the time to list other things that should be there.
Yeah, in the plan itself, you know, Meredith, you want to go back then. These were meant to kind of be exemplary, but in no way for any of these initiatives a comprehensive list. This was a way to kind of be a descriptor and maybe some of the key things in particular. So when we put this together in the document, we'll probably have like a 3 or 4 sentence kind of paragraph under each one of these that sort of describes it, and then with some bullets. But then as we get into the plan itself, you know, we would get into more detail and add more things. So, yeah, that's always a tough one of like, where do you start and where do you stop? You know, sustainability, as we'll see in a minute, is another one. You guys have done so much. You already have a sustainability plan, and we didn't want to just repeat the plan here. We just wanted to kind of hit a couple of key issues. So, but if there are a couple of things in particular that you don't see here that you think should absolutely be called out as part of this, then we'd love to hear that. And if you want to send that in an email or you want to share it now, that's fine. So Ellen, do you want to follow up to that? And then I'll come to you, Lisa.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that strikes me a lot is that when we talk about affordability, it seems to be directly related to housing, which I realize, as we're speaking from the city perspective, that is, you know, one of the places that the city has the ability to do something about more than others. But I don't see a lot of conversation about affordability of all of the other services and accessibility for people who don't necessarily have the means. I think a lot of times we think about, well, if we provide the housing, then everyone has access to the parks, and like that's the end of the conversation. And I think that it goes well beyond that. So that is my one comment, is just thinking about how we're thinking about the financial piece of people and how that affects their life in Middleton, just beyond whether they can afford the rent. And
Yeah.
if we, yeah, I could go on and on, but yeah.
No, thank you. Lisa.
Thanks. And I agree with Ellen about, you know, either spelling it all out or not spelling it out at all. And just, you know, understanding that DEI is a very wide ranging term. And then, sorry to sound like a broken record, but I go back to the 225 plus actions in the comp plan. And I think I know I tallied it up somewhere. Oh, there were 59 actions in the framework, many of which have some resemblance to what's in the comp plan. And I know, you know, the city's going to be going to a referendum in the fall to add more staff. Our staff already will have a difficult time implementing what's in the comprehensive plan. And I'm concerned about adding too many more items to the to-do list without making a deliberate effort to go back to that comp plan and look for strategies and objectives and actions that already match A through K on this list, and then the ones on affordable housing and elsewhere. I just think it's really important. I did provide written comments after the vision panel I was on, and illustrated, you know, one example under affordable housing where we've got a proposed action here, or a strategy in the vision framework that looks very similar to, not identical, but close enough to something in the comp plan that it might be better to just pull that one out and put some specific steps to it. Because if I look at all of these things, like expand and execute city leadership opportunities, you know, I don't know what that means. I don't know, are there 2 things under that, very specific actions with a timeline associated with them, or is it 10 things? And how do we prioritize those? So again, I'm going to say this often, sorry about that, but I just feel like we've got a really good plan with a comprehensive plan, and the staff need to be following up on that over the next 20 years. And I see the strategic plan as a way to help jumpstart that and kind of focus attention on what we, the advisory committee and the vision panel participants and council feel are the most pressing priorities for right now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Kurt.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing to say, and I definitely appreciate what Lisa and Ellen have said, is from a city government perspective, some of these are process DEI improvements, right? To make sure that people are aware of how city government works, translation services, outreach, education, bringing people into city committees. And some of these are what we call, I guess, substantive or outcome-based equity approaches, so that more people on DEI are hired, more affordable housing. And so I don't, you know, we both, or our physical facilities are more universal design. Is there some way that this could be helpful to be broken down for staff of, right? We need better processes, but we also need to focus on DEI as outcomes of our facilities and our designs.
Annette.
Yeah, so I'm gonna just call this out right now. You all are having a problem with, and there's some confusion and tension on DEI. And I think it's going to require more of a conversation, because so some people want to scoop it all and talk about everything. And then some people want to use DEI to talk about race. And that is going to cause a very confusing, chaotic, unclear, no accountability outcome. So I'm going to suggest that it is true that when we talk about DEI, that it is inclusive of all different types of abilities, identities, race, class, gender, etc. However, when you are trying to focus change on areas where there are problems, then you have to name it, call it out, and be specific. And you can't do both by saying DEI, which right now in this conversation, I've heard the attempt to do that. Now, I understand why some people feel discomfort around the conversation. I'm not trying to take us there. However, where I am going to try to take you and help you all understand is that you do need to name it specifically. But my understanding is that there was a desire to talk about race. And I also know that there has been also other groups that also are having issues in being seen and heard too. So this isn't who's first, but we do need to figure out how we're going to talk about it. And so, that's probably not today's conversation, but I just want to bring up that there's tension here about DEI. And if it's still not clear in people's heads, it's hard to get centered around objectives and strategy. Is really what the bottom line is. And then you end up going around in a circle. So this isn't bad. I'm just calling it out because maybe there needs to be more discussion around DEI and what the focus is intended to be before you can have a healthy discussion about what's the strategy, what are the objectives that people want to get into as they think about, what do they want as the top tier and the, second tier and things like that. I mean, some really good discussion, but I think everyone is not on the same page about what it means to say DEI.
Thank you. Anybody have any additional thoughts or reactions that you wish to share? Okay, well, we got some work to do on that one, and we'll continue to do that. Let's go to the next one. Long-term financial and operational stability. Sure as everybody on this call knows, council's already decided to move forward with a referendum in November. And the staff is putting together a list of positions that would be funded out of that. Some discussion about using technology, planning for the closure of TID 3. The comments that we received on this one are again that this was very important, critical initiative, trying to balance investment and affordability. That we raise taxes, can everybody afford to pay for that? Pursuing the referendum, but again, leaving some room to grow. Potentially consolidating some of the initiatives that were under this, and looking at kind of staffing needs, and also a discussion, about feasibility and necessity, and again, sort of our additional separating wants from true needs and making sure that we kind of understand the difference. We'll never be able to afford everything that we would like to do, but there's certainly some things that we have to do, and we need to find a way to pay for those. So any reactions to that? Okay, let's go to the next one. Sustainability and resiliency, again, covers a lot of ground, and given that there's a whole separate sustainability plan, not really wanting to, put all of that out here, just trying to highlight a couple of things that we know are already getting a lot of attention, will continue to need some attention. The feedback we got on these was being more explicit about stormwater and its impact on businesses. So this is another one for the business climate, that obviously the flood had a tremendous impact on a number of businesses, some of whom are no longer with us. Understanding that and addressing it, being more specific that this is focused on environmental sustainability, because the word sustainability, could mean financial, it can mean a lot of different things. Renewable energy is embedded in planning and needs to be long-term. But again, the idea of integrating it with the diversity initiatives and things like maybe making energy efficient improvements to lower income households. So, sustainability is not just what the city does itself, but how it can improve sustainability for its residents. So thoughts on any of these? Lisa, how did I know you were going to have a comment?
Well, as the chair of sustainability, of course, I have to comment on this one. And I have to say, I love F and H and I when I was reading through the feedback from the vision panels. I forget which one it was, but informing the public about how Middleton is progressing with its goals. and making the sustainable city plan more accessible. You know, we're doing those things now as a committee, and we're also trying to encourage residents to live sustainably. We have this whole new Sustainable You series that we're partnering with the library on. And we're just getting started, and this is going to be a long-term goal of ours. I do want to say, though, that I want to make it clear that even though there's going to be a sustainable city plan, sustainability, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, is something that requires a change in our minds, the way we think about things. And so I don't want it to appear like, well, there's a sustainability plan, so let's, not worry about that here, because this needs to be woven through everything that we do as a city, just like, making sure we're living up to our DEI related goals. We all need to contribute to this. And that's why I really like how F and J it looks like a J. F and I in particular talk about, making sure the public knows, and I would say businesses too. So I appreciate all the comments about bringing everybody into helping make sure Middleton's a sustainable city.
Thanks. John?
Yeah, as Kurt knows, you read enough dissertations, you start looking at language. I don't understand C. Some word is missing in there. Consider a policy to set aside for housing. Set what aside for housing?
I apologize. Land, set aside land. I think it's in the summary, but I missed it here when I was reading.
Okay, but yeah, so that's, you need to clarify that one. Thank you.
Right. Meredith, if you want to flip back to the objective itself, just again for everybody to look at. So any other thoughts on this one? Okay, hearing none, we're going to keep moving along. Affordable housing was one, and this was interesting in that everybody agrees that this is an issue. Part of the question then is, since the city doesn't build, own or operate housing, really what can it do? And I know that the housing strategy was just updated, and some things came forward from that, some of which are kind of reflected here. But I know that was one of the things that the staff in particular kind of struggled with, is really understanding what the city's role in trying to bring about affordable housing, should be. So the comments then on this were, one is like establishing kind of a consistent metric of what is affordability, promoting home ownership, which is already in there, trying to provide opportunities for all workers at all levels to live in Middleton, more senior living options, programs to keep ownership affordable, and allowing homeowners to make improvements and maybe providing assistance with that, and a collaborative approach with public-private partnerships, which is already in there as well. But any additional thoughts that you all have on housing affordability and what the city's role in it might be?
Well, the city spent millions of dollars to assist businesses. I think they should be able to come up with a way to do something for housing to keep it affordable.
Other thoughts?
Just enjoy the time you must. And then you can see the pictures.
Aaron, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. Mike, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know you've been kind of involved with the housing committee and brought some things forward recently. Anything that you want to add to this?
Sure. So it is a very difficult issue. We've done a lot on it in the last 15 years. I will say that it feels like you have a bucket and you're building affordable housing a drip at a time for that bucket. It's hard because the more desirable the community becomes, the higher the prices of land here, the better our schools, the higher the prices of land, the more people want to be here. It's a supply and demand issue. A lot of people don't understand you don't just provide affordable housing, you have to incentivize it. The city doesn't own much land upon which to build housing, for example. When we say set aside property, you know, what property? The county just bought most of our growth area for the Conservancy. So that took a lot of property off the market by which the city could have provided more affordable housing. So it's a balance of things. We love our Conservancy, we want to add to it, but there's a cost to doing that as well. And that means there's less land for housing development and for affordable housing development. I personally think that one of the best things that we're working on is to provide accessory dwelling units by right in our zoning code. That might have a long-term effect better than some of the other things that we're doing. We have folks who don't understand that the number of workforce units that we actually, affordable workforce units that we have within the multifamily housing is not a majority. It's a minority of those units that are affordable to people at anything less than 60% of median income. So I've heard a lot of people say, why all of the apartments? Well, people can't afford homes here. That's why all of the apartments. People want to live here. The demand is there. And so the market is responding by building multifamily units, and the city is intervening to the extent it can, both with TIF and with the tax credits, affordable housing tax credits that are offered through IRS. And those are really minuscule tools compared to the breadth and the depth of the housing affordability problem. So I know this sounds like a complaint, but we are quite limited in terms of the amount of land. And when we say set aside land, I just don't know what we'd be setting aside.
Thanks, Mike. Anybody want to add anything to that or any responses to that before we move on to the next issue? Saw a hand, I think. Aaron.
Hi, yeah, I guess, I mean, I will echo previous comments, but, you know, the city does have, you know, some control over this and, you know, what we allow developers to do, specifically in the fees in lieu that we set the bar for, and, you know, maintaining our actual access to things like parks. We control that, and, you know, it's more of a long-term plan in affordable housing, but it controls how much money we have to spend trying to find those resources later on if we hold developers actually accountable up front, and not, which in my opinion are very small fees in lieu that they pay. So just one way. I know the city doesn't have great control over this problem, but just one thing to keep in mind.
Alan.
Yeah, and I'm appreciative that when we started this conversation, we were reminded that this is, you know, what we're talking about is giving the city direction, right? Because I think that part of the problem with housing and top of all of this is that community members seem to have more opinions about housing than they do about a lot of things in our community. And so, you know, can you go back to the slide, the one with the red on the top before that? Yeah, you know, it's like I look at promote home ownership and my initial reaction is to say actually promote, you know, more apartments and promote different kinds of policies that make parking not such a huge piece of everything, and promote, right? I can think of a million things that I would rather promote, because I listened to a lot of conversations at city meetings where there's a lot of sure, do that, but just don't do it anywhere near me. So I don't really know what that gives the city direction to do, but I think that when we talk about education of the community, you know, I see it in some of these other pieces, but that's where we might actually have the ability to make some movement on this issue. Thanks.
Thanks. Paul or Kurt.
Yeah, so I guess with that, to Ellen's point, if we're going to promote home ownership in there, we need to be a little more specific about what we mean, right? So maybe for first generation home buyers, maybe for people previously excluded from the mortgage market, because the truth is, you know, the federal government promotes home ownership with massive tax subsidies. So we already do promote home ownership. So yeah, I guess in the previous panel, there was a lot of anti-rent or anti-apartment comments, and I just don't want that to be reflected in our final strategic plan. Because promoting home ownership is good, but it's, you know, it's often rich white people who can afford to own homes, and that's what the problem is. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I see another hand. Ellen, did you have a comment or? Okay. All right, just looking at the second page. I don't see anyone. Okay, so number 5, public safety and emergency management. This was one where we had emergency management kind of tied to resiliency. The kind of department heads broke it up, brought emergency management, put it with public safety, put resiliency up with sustainability. But highlighted, you know, a few things here relative to emergency management and public safety, some of the things that are ongoing, some of the things that have been discussed, and then the comments on this. We're evaluating the impacts of public safety and emergency management on marginalized communities. Some discussion about the student resource officer program, and that the school district has been evaluating that, and that it will continue to involve, that feels it's very strong and worthwhile program to continue. Needing to look at public health, you know, in light of COVID, that's an emergency management and safety issue as well. Some talk about improving safety of infrastructure, especially for pedestrians, was one of the things that was mentioned. And we already have kind of an emergency management facility, and maybe recognizing that, and that there are some standards out there for some of this. And so as we get into the plan, maybe recognizing those. So thoughts that you all have on this one. Luke.
Yeah, this is excellent. I'm going to highlight E in particular. So this is something that the EMS has brought up to me previously, and the leadership there would have a far better encapsulation of it in terms of what other communities have done in the past in terms of the sharing of various resources in order to, frankly, A, save on cost, but also B, work on better overall delivery of services to individuals. But I think if you ask the EMS staff in particular about the future and priorities, that E really highlights to the top. So I'm really glad to see that called out here. And the create hazard mitigation plan. Yeah, I think and then on C, excuse me, D, excuse me. In particular, look, I'm not telling tales out of schools here where I say that the relations with nearby municipalities outside the city of Middleton aren't the best as of right now. And I see this as a way that we can utilize this as a way to potentially rebuild some of those frayed relationships around the establishment of those series. So that's why I kind of see both D and E interweaving together. But the future of, I think, municipal services is largely going to be more of how can we do more with less? And that is going to be needing to break down the barriers that may exist or the boundaries that exist between these different municipalities in order to deliver the best outstanding services. So if I were to rank these, not to say that we are, I would make sure we would want to highlight D&Es particularly.
Great, thank you. Lisa.
Yes, could you go to the next slide, please, Scott or Meredith? Okay, so H at the bottom, I agree with what Luke just said, especially the part about, in the beginning, looking for ways to, looking to our neighbors, basically, not just the ones with whom we have a strained relationship, but the ones that we don't have a strained relationship with. And I made a note to look for ways to realize efficiencies in public safety, like structuring our systems to more closely match what's working well for our neighbors. And I think H, meet national / recommended standards. I would expand that to say meet national and regional recommended standards and practices. Because I think we can learn lessons from other communities just like they can learn from us. And that'll help us to do more with less.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on this one? And I see Mike's got a suggestion on some language there. So thank you for that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Transportation. So know that this is a kind of an ongoing discussion with Metro and how they're shifting their service, and are there things that the city maybe could look at doing of trying to enhance that service and enhance access to transit within the community, as well as recognizing bike trails and other transportation options. Comments on this one were one, that we didn't really address the airport, and that it is a part of our transportation infrastructure. Maybe look at expanding the trolley to serve residents as well as visitors. Pedestrian safety, again, integrating with other initiatives. Looking at vehicle charging stations, and we do have in here, I think, a reference to electrifying the city fleet, as well as providing charging stations and other infrastructure as everybody starts to move in that direction. The concern about the reduced bus service, and a sense that this needs more urgency and kind of action language. So those were some of the comments we received on this one. Any thoughts? Jill.
I just always like to remind people when we talk about Madison Metro bus service and that bus routing, that includes all the older adult and disabled paratransit service. So I don't even see that on here, and that's okay, but I never like to take up and miss an opportunity to educate people. Don't forget that when we buy that service, and when we talk about Madison Metro bus service, it includes all those critical services for older adults and the paratransit services that are part of that service. So that's just my reminder.
Thank you for that. Kurt.
And I just want to add my voice to what Jill said, but also on the next slide about safety and reducing vehicle pedestrian conflicts. I think that needs to be a high priority. We need to increase pedestrian safety by, engaging in various sorts of traffic calming devices. So it's not just providing the alternative of bike ped transit. It's almost giving a priority to bike ped transit and calming and slowing private automobile traffic. I think that needs to be high on the priority list.
Thank you. Any other ones on this before we move on? Trying to kind of keep us on time here. We got to keep it running. Recreation and wellness. Talk about, continuing partnership with the school district and the idea maybe of some kind of a teen center. One of the things that's come up is that outside of kind of sports programs, really isn't a place for teens to just kind of come together, if nothing else, than to come together and maybe have activities that aren't necessarily sports. Again, looking at other public-private partnerships. And then let's look at the comments on this one. Thought to refer to specific facilities rather than being a little more generalized, expanding partnerships, and that it's not just about adding more programs, but trying to increase accessibility. There was, a comment that when some of these recreation programs open up for registration, that like if you're not on the phone or on your computer within that first 15-minute window, you're just shut out. And trying to look for ways to increase accessibility, in particular for those who don't have that ability to be on the computer right at the right moment. Maintaining facilities is also part of that, and that's building more, but making sure that we maintain what we have. And then talking about arts and music and passive recreation, just not team sports, were some of those comments. And so Luke, you've got your hand up.
Just a question, Scott, on the previous slide, the creation of a golf master plan. Tell me more about golf course master plan. Tell me more about what you envision there, what the 1 or 2 sentence explanation of what a golf course master plan is.
Yeah, I'll do my best. That actually came from our other sub-consultant, PAA, after their discussion with city staff. And so I think it was, looking at the property, are there other things that could happen out there besides golf, and looking at like the clubhouse facility and other things that it might do. But I have to admit that this is not one that at the moment I have a deep level of knowledge of. So I can't answer that in any
no problem. No problem. But basically it's where is this in your understanding kind of what are potential future uses? Where's the golf course as a whole? Its future, where's it going, or where could it possibly go?
Yeah,
exactly. Okay, very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Any other thoughts on this one? All right, seeing none, we'll go to 8. Business development. This actually has 2 pages, and it's not because we thought it was more important or there's that much more there, but we tried to include sub-bullets that were a little more descriptive about what some of this stuff meant. So rather than just saying, hey, modernize Middleton's business parks, we try to give, some examples of what that might mean. Likewise, on the next page, we have some, additional sub-bullets to further describe those. we can go to the next page. Looks like she's trying hard. So anyhow, there's a fair amount. There we go. So again, rather than strictly saying, hey, let's diversify tourism, listed kind of 4 different ways that, that could be done. Again, not that those are the only 4 ways, but to just try to provide a little bit more detail on those. So the comments that we got on this would be looking at attracting kind of a range of innovative businesses where we, I think, mentioned technology specifically, but we should look beyond that. Elevating small and local businesses to help kind of keep the money in the community, because those small business owners also tend to live in the community. Looking to create more connections between students and residents and businesses, especially with the larger employers. There's a sense that a lot of people in Middleton don't even know who some of our bigger employers are, that those companies are here and what they do. So communicating that and having the council be more thinking of and being thoughtful of how different decisions impact the business community as those decisions are being made. John.
Yeah, sorry, I'll come back. My phone is ringing all of a sudden.
All right. So while John's grabbing the phone, anybody else have any questions, any thoughts on this or things you'd like to share? We can flip back to those other pages as you would like.
I'm back. It's a
okay, great.
On number E, I have trouble with the wording under I. City needs to communicate and consider large businesses. I think, on the plan commission, one of the things we deal with is we're run out of space. There's not a whole bunch of open land in this city waiting for big businesses to come in and to attract those things. And I like the emphasis on the smaller business and rethinking the business park and how we deal with our space. But I'm concerned about putting emphasis into trying to bring big businesses into Middleton because there's just simply no room for that. But also wasn't clear quite what that sentence meant when consider. And I presume it meant consider attracting and trying to bring large businesses in, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Right, and that's not really what that meant. That meant that as the city is making decisions on services, programs, other things, that they take into account the needs of the larger businesses. Okay. There were some that felt that they weren't being fully considered or understood as decisions were made. So it was more about understanding the businesses we already have and what their needs are and what impacts there may be on them, not as a recruitment issue.
Okay, that's good. So maybe you could reword that to reflect that. But
yeah.
But I do still want to emphasize, I like the emphasis on the smaller businesses and the homegrown, because that we can deal with in a much better position. And I think that's where the future growth is going to lie.
Any other thoughts on this one, or we jump to the last one? Okay, last one. Communication. So then, different discussions about how the city communicates, how that could be improved. City already does a lot, but maybe so much sometimes that it's hard to for people to find what they're looking for. Maybe sometimes it's information overload. So we have quite a bit of stuff in there talking about hybrid meetings, which I know you're already moving in that direction. Talk maybe about a position specifically to deal with communications on behalf of the whole city. Right now, the city administrator fulfills that role, and maybe that's too much for that particular job to handle. And so comments on this one were trying to bring communications to where people are and having more diverse mechanisms, using existing networks like the senior center and the library and the list that they already have. Also trying to communicate more with younger people through maybe social media and the networks that they use. Also, you know, that it's a two-way street. So it isn't just about how the city gets its message out. It's about how it receives input from people and needing to look at that as well. Not just how do we inform people what we're doing, but how do we give them an opportunity to kind of provide feedback and have input into what we're doing. And then, you know, bilingual communications and looking at partnerships for hosting meetings. One of the things we had, this again kind of overlap under the equity objective. One of the first things on there was taking government to where the people are, meaning literally getting out of City Hall, holding meetings in parks or other facilities around the city so that people who can't make it downtown for one reason or another, you know, have the ability to kind of participate or at least learn more about what's going on. That was really very highly embraced by the council, and the city already is kind of has some of those resources in place to be able to do that. And so again, I think that's something that we'll see more of in the future, but there was a lot of support really across the board for that as part of that communication.
And Scott, I would maybe just jump in here with E. I think I, took the comment that was discussing materials being bilingual, but the conversation was also really like multilingual. So I didn't want anyone to see that and think we were just talking, in two languages, but reflecting the languages spoken in the community, and as much as possible have that person, in a new position be multilingual as well. So that was kind of the comment that was made, but the intention or more spirit behind it is multilingual to reflect languages spoken in the community.
All right, so let's look at our breakdown then of the tiered structure. So Meredith, I'll give you a chance to kind of rewind there. Thank you. So after we went through all of these with each of the groups, we sent out a survey, asked people to kind of rank these in their order of importance. As I mentioned before, we kind of see where that came out. The response to our survey was not as great as we had hoped. For a couple of panels, we only had 2 people. 1 or 2 panels had very high representation, but overall, we got a fair number of responses. So this is what we're looking at. Lisa, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Scott. I just wanted to say that, I see that communication got a low score. I probably gave it a low score just in the, the way I filled out the evaluation or the survey. But I feel it's important to note that communication is critical to every other thing on this list. So if we want to have an equity-centered environment for all residents, how are residents going to get information on opportunities for engaging in their government or participating in parks and rec activities? How are we going to get input from members of the public? And so I don't want us to have the impression that communication is not important because it got a low score, because I actually think the one staff position I can easily justify and lobby for would be a communications specialist whose job it is to really get information out to the people, and I'll throw in the businesses and the industries too.
Thanks. John.
Yeah, I guess looking over, having gone through all of this and listening to what Lisa's saying, I'm concerned about the whole tiering system. I'm not sure exactly what it's trying to accomplish, except to take what were high numbers on some arbitrary response score. The communication fits all over the place. If we're going to do it, I might do 3 or 4 tiers or no tiers. I'm not sure that tiers ranked based on the rankings as you have them group things adequately. For example, 8 and 9. 8 with business is a lot about communication. They work well, but recreation and wellness doesn't necessarily fit with communication. And so it seems just an arbitrary division. Personally, I don't think it's needed.
Great, thank you. Other thoughts on that?
My hand up.
Yeah, Jenny, sorry.
Well, I don't really know how to say this, but I don't see this as just a single list. I feel like it's a multi-dimensional thing, and communication is layered through all of these things. I think, Lisa, that's probably what you're getting at. I think there's some other things as these initiatives or objectives would be worked on, that sustainability is another thing that kind of layers over everything. And I don't know if there's a way to illustrate that better, but it's multidimensional, and that's what makes it so difficult to understand. I don't know how that strikes the rest of you, if that makes any sense or not, but that's just my thought.
Lisa.
I'll just echo Ginny's point, and I had suggested considering sustainability and DEI to be values that applied to all of the objectives, sort of elevating those. And I would throw in even accountability, to the people. But certainly DEI and sustainability are, again, those things that we just need to change our mindset collectively and individually. And that's what makes those two a little different than all of these other strategic objectives, and they actually apply across the board.
Great, thanks. John.
Yeah, it's sort of going with Lisa and Ginny. I think they're raising this real issue about the intermingling and the complexity of this. And as I just come back to why putting it into two arbitrary sets of tiers really doesn't clarify any of this at all to me. And I think that, at some point we have to put things in a list. And I understand, but by putting it in tiers somehow makes it seem like these are individual items. And as Lisa and Ginny said, they're not really. So I concur with what they said.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything you want to add about whether tiers are necessary or worthwhile or not? Or, the idea of breaking some of these out as, values versus objectives. And that's really interesting insight.
Scott, this is Ginny Corwin. I just have one more comment, and not to answer your question, but I'm still not clear on the time frame that we're talking about for this whole effort. Are we looking 10 years out? Are we looking 5, 10, 15? I don't know. I don't think that's clear in the materials that we've seen.
Great question. And, the vision, I would say, is, 10 plus years. The plan itself will really be much more short-term focused, probably more like 5 years. In terms of the specific recommendations and projects that are going to appear in there, it's really something that the council and staff are going to want to review at least annually and update. And then probably after, close to 5 years, you would kind of maybe go through a similar process or, another one to kind of take another kind of comprehensive look. So it's more of a short-term action plan, but with a longer-term objective and goal in mind.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I appreciate you doing that. Annette.
Hello, sorry for being the chimer. But this actually, I want to offer a thought bubble that might help. I'm looking at this too. I'm wondering if I agree that maybe not doing tiers is a good idea. And I also wonder if you created icons that represent each of the areas, especially if you go with the thought that DEI and sustainability is a value. Then when you're talking about things, you're helping people. If there's an icon that goes with each item, then people can see that how whatever work you all are doing, how it's related to those different icons. So it can show up like, this is how we're supporting, affordable housing or public safety, right? Because you've associated an icon to it. And maybe that would also be helpful for the community, because a lot of times the community they're not really sure what exactly is happening, but they do well on pictures saying 1,000 words. So maybe that could be something to consider. And then that means all of it can be balanced, right? Because you just highlight what's being focused on using the icon rather than making people choose which one is more important, because they're all important depending on what you're talking about.
Right. In fact, yes, we absolutely are planning to assign an icon to each one. If you looked at that Glendale example, we had that, in there. And yeah, so even as these things come forward on routine council agendas, you would see that icon and hey, remind them like this is on the agenda because it is implementing this thing that we discussed. So yes, I think that's really important, and what this graphic sort of sets the tone for doing that, or Jocelyn.
Hi, yeah. Thank you for the visual icon, because in my brain, I'm thinking about these as like bubbles instead of a list. And the bubbles are overlapping, they're ebbing and they're flowing, they're moving around. So I think that visual will be really helpful. Going back to what Annette called out before, I just wanted to say thank you for disrupting our conversation there and taking a moment to call us out. And one of the things that the city staff has been doing is participating somewhat minimally at this point, just because of our time commitments in other areas, but working with the organization GARE, which is a national organization called the Government Alliance on Racial Equity. And one thing that may be helpful as we think about where our conflicts are is thinking about this in terms of normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing, because if we're really wanting to affect change and serious outcomes that transform people's lives, we first have to normalize our language and create a shared understanding of what we're talking about in the first place, which kind of sounds like where we're maybe at right now. And then organizing is really around our resources, which could come in terms of people, resources within and across city departments or the community, the money, where's the funding coming from? And then operationalizing is really where we get to the action with, how can we embed these things within our policies and procedures and day-to-day actions, so that way we're not even necessarily talking about it as a separate thing. It's just baked into what we're already doing. So Annette, I invite any comments you might have or thoughts on the GARE framework.
I am very familiar with the GARE framework, and I actually did a presentation being invited by GARE, and I actually work with a colleague who works for GARE. So we're all about GARE. We support it. I think that would be, honestly, it's an inside outside sort of approach, right? There's the outward vision. The community needs to see and know that you're naming it and going to do something. They need to see that representation, which is why it's important to have something that specifically talks about how you're going to address it, while also embedding it in all of the work, right? Behind the scenes where people can't see it. So there needs to be this inside outside strategy, right? So I think you're spot on how you named it and addressed it. And, I'm always happy to disrupt. That's, no, I'm let me not be, but I mean, that's part of what the work is, right? You can't see something that you're not used to working with. And that is why a lot of times we're here to help with that. So I do feel like you all need to have a conversation. It's okay that it's unclear. You will get clear. But I just felt like for purposes of sitting on that slide, you weren't going to get to where you wanted to be in that moment. I think there needs to be some more work behind the scenes, and then come back with something that I think you all can feel more like you can get more productivity out of it, and that it can feel like it addresses the concerns that you all have. And there's actually some really good examples in some of the other areas that you all were working on and that have been shown. So there's some good bones in here in terms of how you get to where you want to go when we specifically talk about DEI. So it's a both and.
Great. Well, thank you both for that conversation. So we definitely got some work to do here. This has been immensely helpful. So really appreciate that. As Meredith noted, everything that's been in the comments, we will, download that and have that. And if you have any other additional thoughts or a midnight epiphany and want to send an email to Meredith with some additional thoughts, that would be most welcome. Our next step in the process here is to, use this input and to take another, stab at these. I'm liking this idea of somehow these are kind of more overlapping than in a tier thing. So we'll see what we can do there. We do have a public meeting scheduled for the 16th of March. And so we'll, what the public sees will be based on the input that we hear from, that we got from you tonight and that we received from the vision panel. So it will look different and hopefully more in line with what you suggested, but that's certainly not the end of it. And we will be reconvening this group again as we start to pull the plan together. So this meeting, Meredith, why don't you kind of take it from here?
Sure. So we have this public meeting scheduled for March 16th at 6 p.m. I might have misspoken at the beginning of the meeting and said 6:30, so that was tonight's meeting. Wednesdays is 6 p.m. and it is being held via Zoom, so there's the link there. This flyer that you see on the screen has been shared with the city to distribute to its different channels, and can have that on the website so that you can share it with your friends and neighbors and just hopefully encourage many people to come and share their input. So what we'll present will reflect, as Scott said, the input we've had here, so it will look a bit different than what we saw tonight, but we will kind of follow a somewhat similar structure in the sense that we'll try and remind people about the strategic plan, its goals, maybe addressing some of the questions that have been come up to make sure everybody is clear about the purpose of the strategic plan, talk about our planning process and where we are, and the inputs that have gone into this product at this stage. And then again, kind of going over the vision, mission, and objectives of the framework, but maybe in the public setting, utilizing some keypad polling and breakout sessions, which will look pretty similar to the workshop that was held at the beginning of the process. So it's a way to, when we have even a larger crowd than maybe we do tonight, can get feedback right away using the polling, and then have small group conversations where people might feel comfortable to share their input. So it will feel a little familiar, but kind of change it up a bit too. And yeah, look forward to having that discussion with the broader public. So if you would like, if you don't have a copy of the flyer, reach out and we can make sure you have that to share with your network.
Any questions on that? And I think we sent out that flyer to all of you already, but we'll do that again and to all the vision panel members. So we certainly invite all of you to attend, and again, bring your friends and neighbors. If you attended our meeting last fall, we kind of did a couple different things where we kind of presented things. We did some instant polling and got some instant results, then broke people into groups, and we're looking at kind of doing that same thing. So there'll be a lot of different ways that people can share their thoughts and opinions, even though it's kind of all virtual. And then what we'll do is post that information then on the website. So for folks who aren't able to make it to the meeting, they can also provide feedback directly through the website. The presentation that we give will be posted there, so they can kind of look through that and then provide their thoughts. So we'll put that up right after the meeting. It'll be up for the rest of March. But then we'll need to kind of finalize some things and move ahead. So really I think people would get a lot more out of it by attending the meeting. So the website option is really, if they absolutely can't make it. I mean, so as you talk to folks, I would try to get them to come to the meeting. And then if they can't, then suggest the website as opposed to just saying they could do either. I mean, certainly they can, but I think they get more out of it when they hear the thing firsthand and then they have an opportunity to interact with their neighbors rather than sitting in their own living room alone and coming up with that. I mean, I know for me, this discussion's been really enlightening. A lot of things have been brought up I hadn't thought of. They're great perspectives, and that's really the benefit of those kind of meetings that you get by attending them versus just sort of doing stuff on your own. So we want the public to have that same opportunity. So I know we're way past time here. Is there any questions that people have about where we're going or any final thoughts that anybody would like to share?
Thank you for getting us together so we could go through this. That was helpful.
Yeah, well, again, thank you very much for coming. And again, the discussion's been wonderful and extremely helpful to us as we start to put this together for all of you. So we will continue moving forward and look for you at the public meeting. And then we'll, set some dates after that. Our goal is still to try to conclude the entire process by late spring, early summer, so that we can have a community rollout, probably like late May or June is our target. And part of that is, kind of coinciding with a new city administrator so that that person, kind of walking in on day one, really, you can literally hand them something. Here's what the community sees for itself. Here's what it wants to do. Obviously, the comp plan will be a big part of that too. And then, kind of here's what to do about it. So I think that'll be very helpful in making that transition for the city. So with that, thanks again. Have a great rest of your evening. And we'll see you again soon.
Great. Thank you.